Okay, we are now in research short paper session. I'll invite first authors.
So hold on.
Yeah, Sri Krishnan,
Shashi.
please go ahead.
Yeah. So we have, like Shashi said, we move into the short paper track. We have 3 papers in this track in this section. So the first paper is from CDAC. The second is from Amrita School of Engineering, Coimbatore, and the third from Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham in Bangalore. We are going to listen to authors who will expound on grid computing. Then there is the next paper is on application of AI to medicine. And the third around text mining and topic modeling. So first, I will invite the team from CDAC, Vineet, Arakil, and Mangalayan. The title of their paper is Relevance of Grid Computing for India in the Era of Cloud Computing. Over to you, Vineet, Mangala. So if Shashi, you can get the authors on stage.
Yes, I'm bringing Vineet on stage.
Yeah, I'm just sharing my screen. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm just sharing my screen. It is taking some time. It is still hanging, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, did you find the option to share the screen? It's the third from after camera, mic, and share.
Yes, I have selected share your entire screen.
Yeah.
But it is, okay, I'll just cancel. I'll try to cancel and share once again. But
yeah.
Oh no, I think it's.
You can also refresh your browser.
Okay. Oh, it has hang, I think. I'm just. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I will just close the screen and I will reopen. It may take a few seconds because I think it has hang. The sharing has hang. So I'll just disconnect and reconnect again.
Yeah, so in the interest of time, do we want to move to the next paper and then come back to you, Vinod? If we have the team from Amrita School of Engineering, Coimbatore, if they are ready. Yamini, Shamika, the team ready? Just checking.
Yeah, Yamini is on. I'm inviting Yamini on stage.
Okay. And to the paper team, you will have 10 minutes to present and 5 minutes for Q&A. So let's try and keep to the time. 15 minutes per paper, 10 plus 5.
Yeah.
So Yamini and team, welcome. So this is Yamini Madan, Shamika Ganeshan, Ganga Gauri, Saumya V, and Sonu KP from the Amrita School of Engineering, Coimbatore. And the title of the paper is R-peak detection in ECG signals using Chepfun. So over to you, Yamini.
Okay, hi everyone, am I audible?
This background noise.
Oh, okay, just a minute.
So Vineet has to go on mute as well in case. It's better, Yamini.
Is it fine now?
Yes.
Okay. Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Yamini and I'm from Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham. I'm doing my MTech in Machine Learning and Artificial Intelligence. And today on behalf of my team, I'll be presenting our paper, which is the R-peak detection in ECG signals using Chepfun. So an ECG is an important part of our life because it is going to deal with the heart. So all of us have smartwatches. We wear smartwatches because we like taking care of our heart and we want our heart to be healthy. So what is the ECG? So ECG is the electrocardiogram, which represents the electrical activity of the heart. And the electrical activity, because the body has sodium and potassium ions present in the blood. So when the potassium and sodium ions move around, this will cause an electrical activity because of the polarization and repolarization of the heart. And this can be captured through the electrodes which will be placed on that body. So in an ECG signal, as you can see from the picture on the right hand side, we have the P, QRS and T wave. So these are the features of an ECG signal which will give us an understanding of how our heart is working. So when we see this signal, we do not need all these features while analyzing the signal. Instead, we might need a few parts of the signal. For example, the QRS complex is one of the most important feature in the ECG signal, as it will represent, it has a good capability to represent the problems that the person is facing or the problems the heart is facing. So any irregularity in the heart peak will lead to or it's an indicator that there is a disease present. So that is why many people, all the work that we see, uses the heart peak detection as one of the major indicators of any disease. So coming to literature survey, we see that there is so many work that has been done with respect to heart peak detection. But here we have chosen around 4 work which is relevant to our proposed method. So the first one is, of course, the Pan-Tompkins heart peak detection method, which is like widely used since the 1980s. And it is a fast and an efficient peak detection, and also it has like the bandpass filter in it, so it has the denoising capability, and it also has the moving filter, the integrated moving filter, which will enable the method to detect the heart peaks within a particular window. So this will improve the accuracy of the detection of the heart peaks. So that is about the Pan-Tompkins method. Then coming to the empirical mode decomposition. So in the empirical mode decomposition, what happens is a particular signal is there, and that signal will be broken down into several sub-signals. So to understand this, I would like to give an analogy of, say, maybe sambar. So in sambar, what happens is the sambar, the food we eat. So in sambar, what happens is we have the liquid and we have different kind of vegetables. So if you want to separate out the different components of sambar, it is possible. And that is exactly what EMD does. So any signal that we see in nature is a combination, or it comprises of many types of signals or many frequency of signals. So by doing EMD, what happens is we will be able to separate out the different sub-signals, also called as modes. And these modes will be, like, every mode will have a unique frequency. So this is what EMD does. But the problem with EMD is that there is a mode mixing that happens. So if we understand that with respect to our analogy, salt is also an ingredient in sambar, but we're not able to extract out the salt from the sambar because it has mixed up. So this is what is the mode mixing which happens in EMD, and that will be overcome in variational mode decomposition, which is VMD. So in VMD, what happens is it is overcoming the problem of mode mixing, and that is because of distinct mode tuning parameter that we do. So the parameter tuning is actually an intense process in VMD. So we have to tune the number of modes that the signal has to be broken down into, and also the bandwidth, that is the frequency range, the frequency range that should be there for each mode. So these are the parameters that we have to tune, which is a little arduous for a user. Now coming to Chebyshev interpolation. Chebyshev interpolation has been used in the work that I'm presenting over here in this paper, the 14th paper. So in there, what they have done is they have used the Chebyshev interpolation to effectively store a large volume of signal. So when we continuously monitor a patient, there definitely will be a large amount of signal. And then if there is some method which is helping us to save or to store these signals efficiently using lesser number of points, but efficiently, the information should not be lost, then that kind of a method will definitely be appreciated, which is what Chebyshev interpolation is doing. So this will reduce the computational cost as well, because we don't need, like, for example, if a signal is having, say, 10,000 points, we don't need all the 10,000 points while analyzing the signal. Instead, a lesser number of signal which is efficiently representing the same signal can be used. But here in this paper, they have done it only with respect to storage. So they have done it only in the perspective of storing the signal efficiently, and it has not been explored enough with respect to R-peak detection, which is what we are planning to do. So let me just give you a brief idea on what ChepFun is before moving on to the objective. So ChepFun is it's an open source package which is compatible with MATLAB, meaning it will work on MATLAB. It's a MATLAB package, and it also provides up to 15-digit accuracy. So we have this mathematical concept that any smooth function can be represented using polynomial interpolation, which is what we see on the left-hand side also in the figure 2. So in the figure, we can see that we don't need all the points to represent the signal. Instead, you can see the blue color points which are marked, which will be enough to represent this entire signal efficiently. So these points that you see is what is called as the Chebyshev points. And using these points, we can replicate, or we can reproduce this entire signal. So this will reduce or it will improve the efficiency of the storage and the representation of the signal. So one advantage of ChepFun is that it works equally well for piecewise smooth and also for smooth signals. So the figure 3 is actually an example of the piecewise smooth signal. So what's the meaning of piecewise smooth signal is that it is not differentiable. So if you give it to a normal differential function, it is not differentiable because it is discontinuous. But when you give it to ChepFun, what happens is it separates it out into different different non-differentiable functions or different piecewise smooth functions. So if you see here, from -1 to 1 will be one piece, from 1 to 2 it will be another piece, and then from 2 to 4 it will be the third piece. So the ChepFun will separate out this function into 3 separate pieces, and then do a polynomial interpolation on this, and then get the ChepFun representation or ChepFun object of this particular function. And each smooth piece that we see over here is called as a fun. So we have 3 funs over here. And also the extrema as in the minima and the maxima of ChepFun can be, okay, so generally, let's leave ChepFun. Normally, how do we find the extrema, that is the local maxima or minima? So when it comes to minima, we find it out using the roots of the derivative. So instead, so now when we have an ECG and we have say 10,000 points or 20,000 points, which is still a small number, but when we have so many points, it is not feasible computationally to do every time differentiation and then finding the root of it. So ChepFun is going to overcome that, where it has an inbuilt function which will overcome this and which will directly find the roots of the signal using the min-max tool. It is an inbuilt tool that we have used. So the objective of our paper is to explore the ability of the detection of the R-peaks in an ECG signal using ChepFun, and also to draw a comparison between the established techniques of variational mode decomposition, which is VMD, and also Pan-Tompkins. So the data that we have taken is a standard data set that is available, which is it's an open data set, which is the MIT BIH arrhythmia data set, which has 48 records. And the data is from 2 channels, and also the sampling rate is 360 samples per second. So in the methodology, the data pre-processing part, so what we're doing is we're extracting the signals and the ground truth annotations using the PhysioNet WFDB toolbox. So using this, we'll get our signals and also the ground truth labels. Now, as I told you on the previous slide, the signal has 2 channels. So what we observed is that the second channel is found to be noisy, and therefore we're using only the first channel in our analysis. So now coming to the 3 methods. So in ChepFun, we have not at all applied any data pre-processing. We're just using the raw signal, which might have a lot of noise in it, just to see. It's an initiative. We want to check how well is ChepFun working for this kind of a problem. And therefore, we have not applied any data pre-processing. So now coming to Pan-Tompkins. In Pan-Tompkins, as I already mentioned, the data pre-processing part is already there. So the Pan-Tompkins has a capability to do denoising and to do pre-processing in such a way to extract the R-peaks alone and to detect them efficiently. And similarly, in VMD also, we have taken some concept of that, where in Pan-Tompkins, we do squaring, we do normalization. So we have applied that to VMD as well, which is based on a paper, of course, in a work that they have done. So in VMD, we are having pre-processing in VMD as well to detect the R-peaks. So this is a methodology in a visual representation in a block diagram for easy understanding. So first what we do is we extract the first channel of the data of the signal, and then we extract the signal and the annotations, which is the ground truth label, using the WFDB tool. Then we convert this into a ChepFun object using Chebyshev interpolation. Then we use a min-max function, which is an inbuilt tool to find the roots of a signal. And then we use appropriate threshold to find the R peaks. So the parameter tuning here comes to the thresholding to find the optimal threshold to find the R peaks. So now the evaluation metrics is we have like 3 evaluation metrics or 4 evaluation metrics. So first thing is, how are we even going to allow a margin of error in detection of R peaks? So based on some work done, a few work done, we have taken the value of 10% of the sampling rate. So 10% of the sampling rate is for us, it's 360, which is 36. So we will allow a margin of 36 samples in the detection of the R peak. And then we construct, this is a binary classification problem as to detect whether an R peak is there or it is not there. So we construct a confusion matrix, and from the confusion matrix, we get the values of false positives, false negatives, and true positives. And using this, we evaluated the metrics are detection error rate, sensitivity, precision, and accuracy. So these are the 4 metrics that we use to evaluate our model. So this is the results that we get, and as I already mentioned, in VMD and Pan-Tompkins, we are applying pre-processing. In ChepFun, we are not applying. So that is actually very visible in the results also. You can see for signal number 105 and 232. So in 105, the predicted positivity is actually performing as equal as the standard algorithms, which is VMD and Pan-Tompkins, and even sensitivity, accuracy, and detection error rate, they're performing quite equally to that. And in signal number 232, the ChepFun is actually performing better than the VMD and the Pan-Tompkins. We can see that the predicted positivity, which is the second column, is 1, while in VMD and Pan-Tompkins, it's only 0.96. So in these two, this is just a sample of these 2 signals where it's actually performing well. And there are a few signals also which do not perform well because of a lot of noise present in it, a lot of artifacts present in it which are not removed, and that can be observed in signal number 104. So the detection error rate is quite high because the predicted positivity is low, and this is because the signal has a lot of noise and also like positive and negative amplitude. So that is why we are not able to detect properly in ChepFun. So this is the results for those 10 signals. We have the comparison of the 3 methods with respect to sensitivity, detection error rate, predicted positivity, and accuracy. So we can see that only for the first signal, it is like a little bad. But then when you see most of the other signal, it's actually performing quite well, though here and there are a few glitches. This is because we have not done any pre-processing. So now, so as I told you, the parameter that has to be tuned is the threshold. So above that particular threshold only, the peaks will be detected. So in this visual representation, you can see on the right-hand side that I have compared the VMD, the Pan-Tompkins, and the ChepFun to show how the peaks are being detected. So coming to the conclusion, what I would like to tell is that ChepFun is performing equally well to other algorithms when the signals are not having many artifacts or when the signal is less noisy. But when it comes to noisy signals, probably if we denoise it, if we pre-process it and then give it to the signal, then it might work much better because as we see, the results are comparable. So maybe if we pre-process and then give it as an input, it might work much better than what actually it's working. And then also, so when I talk about one-sided spectrum or signal, so sometimes we can see that the R peak amplitude will not be only positive. Sometimes the R peak amplitude will be negative as well. So in that case, ChepFun is not going to work properly, which is why we need a pre-processing. So what the future scope that we think we could do is, of course, the first thing is to pre-process the signal and then observe the performance of ChepFun over this pre-processed signal, and also experiment other functionalities of ChepFun if to see something is going to match in or something is going to be helpful in R peak detection. And next thing is VMD is actually very good with respect to the efficiency, VMD is efficient with respect to separating out the different modes. So we can take a particular mode and then give that as an input to ChepFun, So it will be a clean signal, which is an input to ChepFun. And then we can use a simple detection of R peaks in ChepFun for the R peak detection. So these are our differences. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Yamini. So I have a question.
Okay.
So you started with cogently listing prior art, and you systematically inferred their limitations and positives. And thus you motivated your work where you use different objects to find RP.
Yes.
So at a fundamental level, why is your based method, even without data processing, as you pointed out?
Yeah.
And at least for some signals, why does it does it manifest a lesser error rate and show more precision? So it seems to be a simpler method with at least similar accuracy to Tompkins and BMD, right? So what is the theory here?
Yeah.
Fundamental level, how do you explain this?
Okay, so here actually, if you see signal number 104, it is having both positive and negative amplitude. That is, R peaks go up and R peaks go down as well. So because of that, what happens is the threshold parameter, while tuning, it is a little tough. So we cannot get the optimal threshold, which is why if you denoise it, it will be able to perform better. And why we have not pre-processed is we saw that there is actually comparable result. That is only for signals where there's a lot of noise, the ChepFun is not performing well. But when in cases where there's no noise, ChepFun is actually performing equally well, which is why we have not applied pre-processing, just to see how well it's doing.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Okay, then I think we will close this talk and move to the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will go back to Vineet from CDAC. Vineet, so Shashi, can you get Vineet back on stage?
Yes, I'll bring Vineet on stage.
Yeah.
I'm trying to share the entire screen again.
Welcome, Vineet.
So I hope you're able to.
Yes, we can see.
So I'll be talking on the relevance of grid computing for India in the era of cloud computing. So this is going to be my presentation outline. At CDAC, we have worked in Garuda, which is a national grid computing initiative of India. So I'll be talking a bit about that, followed by about grid computing and how it differs from cloud computing, why grid computing matters for India, and a few challenges faced by grid computing. So now coming to CDAC, it stands for Center for Development of Advanced Computing, and it is an R&D organization coming under the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. And CDAC was initially set up for manufacturing the supercomputers for India. So we have several Param series of supercomputers that have been manufactured by CDAC, and we later diversified into Garuda, which is India's national grid computing initiative. And we also have worked on a couple of cloud computing projects. So we actually worked on the Sumega Scientific Cloud. So this work is a result of our experience on grid computing, supercomputing, as well as cloud computing. So now coming to what is grid computing. It is a distributed computing paradigm. It is somewhat similar to cloud computing, but has some differences. In grid computing, generally what we try to do is we interconnect various supercomputers so that we can use the huge computing power of these supercomputers for solving grand challenge problems. So here the resources are generally geographically distributed, since the supercomputers themselves tend to be geographically distributed. The various organizations will be contributing resources. So this is one important point. When you have a single supercomputer, usually it will be a single organization which will be contributing the resource. But when it comes to grid computing, several organizations will be contributing the resources. And using grid computing, huge computational and storage requirements can be addressed, since the various supercomputers can be interconnected to make a virtual supercomputer. Generally, we say that 3 criteria should be satisfied for a distributed computing setup to be called grid computing. First of all, as far as possible, it should adhere to open standards. Secondly, there should not be any centralized administration. When you are having multiple organizations contributing resources, you obviously cannot have centralized administration, and you should be able to provide non-trivial quality of service. So now coming to how grid computing differs from cloud. So there are many differences. First of all, in grid computing, we are very much trying to extract the maximum performance. So we tend not to use virtualization in grid computing. But whereas in cloud computing, virtualization is extensively used. And in grid computing, it is more oriented towards research. But cloud computing, it is more oriented towards commercial implementations. And again, grid computing, it is more oriented towards heavily parallel scientific applications. This is because, as I have already mentioned, generally in grid computing, we connect supercomputers which are massively parallel systems. But in cloud computing, the applications need not be heavily parallel. But it doesn't mean that cloud computing doesn't utilize parallel resources. And again, when it comes to grid computing, the applications are generally long-running applications. These are generally scientific applications, and scientific applications are parallel applications, and they tend to take hours and days to complete execution. But in cloud computing, generally we are oriented towards applications which require short response time. And in grid computing, as I have already mentioned, we try to extract the maximum performance. So it means that we try to run a few applications rather than trying to run a huge number of applications. But in cloud computing, we try to run several applications belonging to several users so that we can achieve maximum system utilization across a wide variety of applications. Grid computing depends on high performance parallel applications and simulations for return on investment. But when it comes to cloud computing, it depends on economies of scale for return on investment. And again, in cloud computing, the ROI tends to take shorter durations, whereas when it comes to grid computing, since the very nature of work involves research, the ROI tends to take longer duration. And again, as I have already mentioned, grid almost by definition is geographically distributed. So the fault tolerance is inherent within grid computing. But cloud computing need not be geographically distributed. All the resources may be provided by a single provider, in which case we have to explicitly take care of fault tolerance. So now coming to why grid computing matters for India. This is the crux of the paper. First of all, grid computing need not be mutually exclusive from cloud computing. Both can coexist. Grid computing can coexist with cloud computing by targeting different types of users. And high-end computing facilities are still maturing in India. If you look at the latest top 500 list of fastest supercomputers in the world, the fastest supercomputer in India ranks 66th. So what this means is high-end computing facilities are still maturing in India. So many of the researchers still do not have access to enough supercomputing facilities. So grid computing can provide access to these different researchers. So they can provide access to different computing facilities. And in India, there is a huge talent pool of researchers, but they need access to systems for implementing the research ideas. So grid computing can help in this aspect. And grid is optimized for HPC. So the systems are high-end systems, and there is a multi-level and efficient scheduling. So when a user comes with a requirement, so suppose he wants to submit a weather forecasting code, the scheduler can search which is the best supercomputing facility that can execute the job at the fastest rate. So using a multi-level scheduling, this can be achieved. And grid can make optimum utilization of the available resources by making the resources available to wider audience, while at the same time without sacrificing performance. So when you have a single supercomputer managed by a single organization, the availability of the resources may be limited to the researchers from that particular institute. But when you have a grid computing framework, there will be multiple organizations participating in the effort. So these resources can be made available to a much wider audience, while at the same time, since we are interconnecting supercomputers, the performance is not affected. And grid computing, generally, it tends to be more on the collaborative line rather than on the payment line. So cloud computing generally tends to be based on the pay per use mechanism. So you pay for the whatever resources that you actually use. But when it comes to grid computing, you are actually trying to share the resources, and a payment mechanism doesn't involve. And grid computing targets a different type of category of users. The users who are belonging to the parallel computing community and the scientific community. So the number of users, the number of such users are typically much less than when compared to the number of cloud computing users. But though the number of users are less, the amount of resources that they require, it's much higher. They tend to be real high-end computing resources. And again, when it comes to India, it is a developing country where not all researchers can afford the cloud computing facilities. So grid computing can be of great use here. Now coming to the challenges faced by grid computing. So I'm nearing the end of my talk. So return on investment can be a big challenge in grid computing, since the applications tend to be research oriented, and since research generally takes a long time to give the results. The return on investment can take a long time, and it may not be consistent also. And in grid computing, we provide access to users who do not belong to any organization. So we have to verify the credentials, because we are going to allow the users to use these high-end resources, and if they don't utilize it properly, it can get blocked. The other users may not be able to use the resources. And the grid computing tend to end up being dominated by government players. This is because of the issue of return on investment. So when return on investment is in question, only government can afford to make the huge investments required. But then when it becomes dominated by government players, it can actually reduce innovation because of the lesser number of players. The more the number of players, the better the innovation. And research may not always give fruitful results. As this is one point that I have already touched upon multiple times. So, but when you don't get results fast, the very importance of the work itself sometimes get questioned. So this also is a major challenge being faced by grid computing. So now with this, I finish my talk and would be happy to take up any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Vineet. Very good talk. Let me start with a question and then open it to the audience. So Vineet, you mentioned certain properties as applying to cloud but not to grid. You started by listing a necessity of virtualization and lack of ability to run HPC as certain characteristics of cloud that are not applicable to grid. And you, at the end of the presentation, you even said that researchers cannot afford cloud but can possibly afford grid. So my question to you is, today all these lines have gotten blurred, right? Virtualization is really a don't care condition on cloud. I mean, there are you have bare metals on rent on AWS and Azure and IBM Cloud and others. There are customers who run HPC on cloud, and the grain of cloud computing today is just as a service consumption and pay as you go billing. So you can even have a grid and wrap a cloud OSS and BSS around it. So shouldn't you see cloud and grid as two different paradigms and not necessarily compare and contrast them, unless, say, for example, you see problems that are common to both grid and cloud? So unless that exists, aren't they kind of different and they could complement each other or compete to two different things, right?
Yeah, actually, as I have already mentioned, grid and cloud, this need not exist as separate entities. They can actually coexist. And as you rightly pointed out, there are now a lot of efforts in enabling HPC in cloud. And because even the virtualization environments are now maturing, so now it is possible to virtualize the environments without much of performance penalty. But at the same time, the primary motivation for cloud is economies of scale. And the very idea of economies of scale means that you try to share the resources among multiple users. But when it comes to supercomputing, many times you will find that you tend to take the entire resources on a dedicated mode so that you can get the maximum performance. So it is very much possible that cloud computing can satisfy to a large extent the parallel and scientific computing requirements of today. But still, at the same time, you find that all over the world, many organizations are still establishing dedicated supercomputing facilities, primarily because of performance concerns. And when you use grid computing to interconnect these supercomputers, you do not really incur any performance penalty. So that is why grid computing is still relevant. in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Okay, if not, we will thank you very much, Vineet and team from CDAC.
Thank
So
you. Thanks a lot.
we'll move to the next paper now. And this paper is from a team from Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham, Bangalore. The team is Nivedita, Naveen Kumar, Mastan Rao, Aditya, and Dr. Shekhar Babu. And the title is Develop CSR Themes Using Text Mining and Topic Modeling Techniques. So I will invite the speaker. So Nivedita is the speaker. So thank you. Over to you, Nivedita. You can load your presentation and start.
Thank you, Shri Krishna. I'll just start my presentation now. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning to one and all present. I would like to talk about the paper that we have done, develop CSR themes using text mining and topic modeling techniques. I would like to introduce my teammates, Mr. Naveen Kumar. Actually, he is not present here due to some unavoidable reasons. Mr. Aditya Ram, Mr. Mastan Rao Parimi, and Professor Shekhar Babu, who have been guiding through us this entire paper. So this is a just brief overview of my presentation. First, I'll give the introduction, then I'll go into the objective and purpose, then architecture modeling results, and then finally the conclusion and future scope of the research done. Introduction. So why we have to look into the CSR themes and data? This is because with the increase in social awareness and environmental problems, companies are forced to become socially responsible because citizens feel or consumers feel that a socially responsible company is one that they should go. And also this is being mandated by the Companies Act in India 2013, which states that all companies must involve in some sort of CSR activities. So we try to focus on the same. So the current research uses, we have done NLP techniques to understand the CSR and sustainability activities by the Indian companies. Why NLP techniques is that with text mining, the large, as we all know, the reports are very large, and to understand that we need a suitable technique, and we went to the text mining technique, which would help us understand the CSR activities done by the Indian companies. So objective and purpose of the research. The objective of the research is to find a topic model which gives an overview about the CSR activities done by the company. Why we should understand this? If we understand the CSR activities, it will be helpful to understand what all activities are being done. And this enables us to understand what is the main theme or area of focus that these companies focus on. Now I'll come to the architecture and modeling part. Here, first we have collected a data. As we could see in the figure 1, we collect the data and then we do the pre-processing steps, and then we get a bag of words, and then we go on to model it using the LDA algorithm. And then from the LDA algorithm, we have the text and the theme that is being identified by the LDA algorithm. Then we use that for the machine learning model as an input. Based on these inputs, we create a model, and we check for the with different machine learning models for the same. So our data consisted of 150 Indian annual reports of 150 Indian companies for analysis purposes. So then we did the text extraction part, and then we cleaned, stop word removing, tokenization and lemmatization were all done. This was done basically using the PyPDF2 and NLTK library because these two libraries were simple enough and also gave us much better results. Then for the topic modeling, we did using the LDA algorithm, and this LDA algorithm gave us 5 specific themes like environmental sustainability, societal development, education, healthcare, and agriculture. These were the 5 prominent themes given by the LDA algorithm. So then with using these LDA output from the LDA algorithm and the text extracted, we went on to build the machine learning model, supervised machine learning model. Here we used two vectorizing feature extraction, that was count vectorizer and TF-IDF vectorizer. Then we built the model and we used SVM, decision tree and random forest models for building the machine learning model, and the data was split in the ratio 7:3, where 70% of the data was used for training the set and 30% was used for testing the data set. So these were the results. So here we could see that this is just a snapshot. So here we could see that the companies mostly focused on free healthcare, then education and societal development. This was the topic modeling result we got from the LDA. Then using this, we built a decision tree model, random forest model and SVM model. SVM is nothing but support vector machine. So from the tables here, the left table represents the FN score of the models. Here we could see that the random forest performed was relatively better for agriculture, but it was not up to the mark in the healthcare department because the data was skewed a little bit. This could be attributed to the fact that about 150 companies were taken and not all companies focus on healthcare, agriculture. So this was the reason why we got a low FN score in healthcare. The next one, in societal development, the random forest with TF-IDF performed better. And the same way for education, the SVM model performed better relative to the random forest model. And in environmental sustainability, again, we could see that the random forest model performed better. And the table on my right side is the accuracy of the models, which predicted the true positive rate and true negative rate comparatively better. So this was the accuracy of the models that we got across the three decision machine learning models. Then we have the precision and recall of the model. The precision gives mainly the precision gives the specificity of the model, like how much information can be retrieved among the relevant documents. So here we could see that the random forest performed better in the agriculture category, whereas in the healthcare category, the SVM performed better. Again, in the societal development category, the random forest performed better. And in the education category, the SVM performed better. And in the environmental sustainability category, we could see the random forest with TF-IDF performed better. With count vectorizer performed better. And for the recall of the model, we could all see that the random forest did better in the agriculture, societal, and environmental sustainability parts. But when coming to the education, the SVM performed better. So from these results, what we could see that is that the random forest performed better among the supervised model to a large extent, and the TF-IDF vectorizer feature, which takes into account the term frequency and the inverse document frequency as a feature extraction method, performed better in the feature extraction part. And the further scope of the study could be extended by increasing the number of reports. Say, for example, we had only 150 companies. If the companies' reports are increased, we could see that the model could be able to predict accurately. And also, we had taken only the Indian context under study. And if it is studied across different countries, we could maybe find a trend among them. That could be the future scope of the research. Thank you.
Thanks, Nivedita. So let me, a good presentation. So there's one question that I have. So what you did was you used data set, you did top modeling, feature extraction, build ML models using multiple techniques, right? And you concluded that certain models performed better for certain applications. So my question is there insight from this in terms of solving a research challenge? For example, based on the result, is it possible to automatically select a model that would be the best fit for particular problem? And
yeah, that was
the overall insight from a research challenge.
Yeah, a very good question there. Actually, we were trying to do an automatic one, but given the constraints we had and the limited time, and we were not able to do it better. Actually, we tried doing it using the CNN or even some neural networks to do the same, so that once we give the report, it will give us which topic is being focused there, which would give much more faster and better insights and better automated way. That's what we actually wanted to continue in the study.
Good. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Okay, so if not, we will conclude this short paper session and move on to a tutorial session.
Yes. We'll move on to next tutorial session.